You bury flowers on a grave without thinking twice about it. You light a candle, you say a few words and go quiet. It feels natural, almost automatic, like something written into you. But the real answer to where this comes from is far stranger than tradition. It goes back further than religion. It goes back further than language itself. Somewhere in a cave in what is now Iraq, more than 60,000 years ago, a body was lowered into the ground. Around it, pollen from clustered flowers was later found packed into the soil. Researchers led by Ralph Selecki called it the world's first funeral, a Neanderthal funeral. For decades, that idea reshaped how people saw our extinct cousins. Not brutes, mourners. Later, scientists pushed back. Some argued the pollen came from burrowing rodents, not human hands. The debate is still not fully settled. But here is the part that matters more than who is right. The fact that this argument exists at all tells you something. Somewhere between animal instinct and modern ritual, a line was crossed. And nobody agrees exactly where. Think about what death actually is to an animal. A gazelle does not bury its herdmate. A chimpanzee mother will carry her dead
infant for days, sometimes weeks, grooming a body that will never respond again. Primatologists have documented this again and again. It looks like grief. It might be grief. But it stops there. No stone is placed. No memory is built. The body is eventually left behind, and life moves on exactly as before. Something different happened in your lineage. Somewhere, a member of an early human group looked at a corpse and did not just feel loss. They acted on it. They dug. They arranged. They marked a place in the earth, and in doing so, they created the first physical proof that a person had mattered. Why would evolution favor that? Digging a hole takes energy. It takes time. In a world of predators and starvation, none of that is free. This is where the science gets interesting. Anthropologist Paolo Villa, working on sites across Europe, has argued that early burial was not really about the dead at all. It was about the living. A buried body does not attract scavengers into camp. It does not spread disease. It does not force a group to see and smell decomposition every day while trying to survive. Death management, in other words, may have started as a hygiene problem before it ever became a spiritual one. But that explanation only goes so far, because some early burials were not just holes, they were arrangements. At Shanidar, again, and later at sites in Israel and Portugal, bodies have been found positioned deliberately. Knees drawn to the chest, hands placed just so, objects nearby that served no practical purpose at all, a shell, a stone tool that still had an edge, red ochre pigment, dusted across bones like something painted on for a reason no one alive can ask about. Hygiene does not explain ochre. Hygiene does not explain a curled sleeping position, as if the dead were only resting. So what does? Around 100,000 years ago, something shifted inside the human mind. Cognitive archaeologist Stephen Mithen has proposed that this period marks a fusion of different kinds of intelligence, the practical, the social, and the abstract, all wiring together for the first time. Once that fusion happened, humans stopped only reacting to the world. They started imagining it. They could picture someone who was gone. They could hold an absence in their mind as clearly as a presence. That is the moment burial stopped being about smell and started being about meaning. Consider what a grave actually requires, cognitively. You have to understand that a body will still be a body tomorrow, next season, next year. You have to project forward into a future you will not directly witness. You have to believe the placement matters, even though the person inside will never see it. That is not instinct. That is imagination applied to loss. And once imagination enters the picture, everything changes. A grave is not just a grave anymore. It is a message. Sometimes to the gods, if the group had begun to imagine gods, sometimes only to each other. Look, this person was one of us. Look, we do not forget. Fast forward tens of thousands of years, past the ochre and the shells, into sites like Sungir in Russia. There, archaeologists uncovered graves from roughly 34,000 years ago containing thousands of painstakingly carved ivory beads, sewn once into clothing that had long since rotted away. Some of the dead were children. The labor required to create those beads has been estimated at thousands of hours. Thousands of hours, spent not to keep anyone alive, but to send someone into death dressed like royalty. That is not hygiene. That is not accident. That is a society telling itself a story about what a human life is worth, even after it ends. Here is the part that should make you sit with your own candle a little longer. Every culture that came after inherited this same instinct, even when the details diverged wildly. Ancient Egyptians preserved bodies for an afterlife journey. Some Tibetan traditions offered the dead back to vultures, believing the body was never the important part to begin with. Victorian families photographed their dead as if capturing one last shared moment. Different beliefs, different objects, same underlying pulse, the refusal to let death be nothing. Psychologists have a name for what may sit underneath all of this. Terror management theory, developed by researchers including Sheldon Solomon, argues that much of human culture, from religion to art to national identity, functions as a buffer against the awareness of our own mortality. You build things, you believe things, you ritualize things, partly because some ancient part of you understands
what is coming and needs a way to hold it without falling apart. That flower-scattered grave in Shanidar, real or reinterpreted, sits at the very start of that impulse. Not proof of tenderness alone, proof that a species had begun asking a question no other animal seems to ask. What happens to meaning when a person stops existing? You are still asking it. You ask it every time you visit a grave you did not need to visit. Every time you keep a photograph of someone who will never look back at you. Every time you tell a story about a person, just to keep some piece of them moving through the room. None of that is silly. It is not superstition left over from less rational times. It is one of the oldest technologies you own, older than fire in some tellings, a way of turning an ending into something that can still be carried. So the next time you kneel at a grave, or light that candle, or simply pause when someone brings up a name that is no longer here, remember what you are actually doing. You are not performing an empty tradition. You are running software that is at least 100,000 years old, built by people who looked at loss and, for the first time in the history of life on this planet, refused to let it be nothing. You bury flowers on a grave without thinking twice about it. Now you know exactly why you never could stop. And maybe that's why humans never stopped burying their dead. Not simply because we fear death, but because we refuse to let the people we loved become nothing more than a memory that fades away. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, because the next question might change the way you see the world too.